A poor girl went on a blind date, only to discover her match was an 80-year-old bald man. Before she could even process what was happening, the old man loudly announced that he was her blind date. The girl was mortified. She triple-checked to make sure she hadn't made a mistake, but the old man claimed he was hard of hearing and asked her to speak up. She had no choice but to ask if he was Kim Jin-goo's father, her actual blind date, but the old man loudly declared that he himself was Kim Jin-goo, her match. His antics had everyone around them in stitches, while the girl wished she could disappear. The old man then started bragging at the top of his lungs, claiming he owned 20 luxury mansions worth millions each, with assets totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. If she married him, he said, it would all be hers. The crowd burst into laughter again, while the girl burned with embarrassment, not knowing how to respond. Seeing her reaction, the old man asked if she felt humiliated. She honestly replied that she couldn't be more embarrassed. Her response sent the old man into fits of laughter, and the crowd roared once more. When the date ended and she walked him out, the old man said he really liked her and told her to marry into his family soon. The girl was speechless and flatly turned him down, but the old man countered that if she wasn't interested, she could have left the moment they met. Why stick around with an old geezer like him? She replied it was because she couldn't bear to let an elderly person leave empty-handed. The old man looked a bit disappointed but quickly mentioned he was wealthy and didn't have much time left. Once he died, she could enjoy all his wealth, but the girl said she'd also become a widow, which she absolutely didn't want. After that, the old man dropped the subject. After seeing him off, the girl didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this ridiculous blind date. Her name was Jean Dalray, a young single mother. With her husband and father-in-law deceased, she lived with her mother-in-law, depending on each other for support. She thought the absurd blind date fiasco was over, but to her shock, the old man showed up at her workplace the next day, bellowing for her. His scene drew a huge crowd. Completely mortified, she tried to get him to leave, but the old man suddenly called out to his son. It turned out his real purpose was to find a wife for his son. After the misunderstanding was cleared up, Dalray accepted the real Kim Jin-goo's apology. Just as she was about to leave, Jin-goo stopped her and said she should marry him, preferably with a March wedding since he had to go to America in April. This bizarre statement left Dalray completely baffled. She immediately said she had no intention of accepting, but Jin-goo couldn't understand why. He boasted about his excellent qualifications. He could earn her monthly salary in just 2 days, had a master's degree, and most importantly, no kids. With all his money and power, there was no reason for her to refuse. Dalray was furious and rejected him again. Jin-goo then complained that she should have said no earlier instead of wasting 2 minutes of his time, 2 minutes in which he could have made hundreds of dollars. Dalray was so angry she could explode. In her rage, she accidentally backed into another car while leaving, making her already terrible mood even worse. The owner of the car she hit was Kwon Oh-jun, a playboy who conned money from women. Just moments ago, he'd been passionately kissing girlfriend 1.0 at the airport, tearfully seeing her off. But the second she left, he took the money she'd given him and headed out to party. Before even leaving the airport, he'd already spotted his next target. Seeing a young woman being scolded by her supervisor, he immediately approached, pretending to exchange currency and offering a comforting handkerchief. Then he faked a phone call about $1 billion business deal, gently consoled the girl, and wrote down his number. After this carefully orchestrated performance, the girl was hooked without even realizing it. Just as the girl called to thank him, Oh-jun had already arrived at a hotel for a date with girlfriend 2.0. But luck wasn't on his side this time. Before he could make his escape, girlfriend 2.0's husband and his goons cornered him in the room. Oh-jun got beaten to a pulp for 2 solid hours. Fortunately, he was physically resilient. After struggling, he finally escaped the thugs. When he reached the parking lot, he found Dalray's note. Before he could even start cursing, debt collectors Jong-gu and Lee-suk were already standing in front of him. He tried to resist, but Jong-gu knocked him out with one slap and dragged him into the back seat. When he came to, he was completely at the mercy of the debt collectors. Lee-suk cut straight to the chase. He had 3 weeks to pay back $30,000 in interest or they'd break his arms and legs. To make sure he wouldn't skip out, Jong-gu beat him up again. Facing gangsters even more dangerous than himself, Oh-jun was helpless. That's when he remembered Dalray, who'd hit his car. Desperate for money, he immediately asked her to meet. Dalray was still fuming about the blind date and was on the phone giving Jin-goo a piece of her mind, saying if he was so capable, he should turn her $30,000 savings into $100,000 through investment. The con artist Oh-jun overheard this. Learning that Dalray had $30,000, he was thrilled and immediately started plotting how to scam her out of it. He claimed his car was totaled and demanded she take responsibility. Jean Dalray couldn't believe what she was hearing. She quickly used what little physics knowledge she had to argue it was impossible. She'd only been backing up in an underground garage. There was no way his car could be totaled. Caught off guard, Kwon Oh-jun found himself speechless. He quickly backpedaled, admitting his car wasn't actually totaled by her. Instead, he claimed that because of the note she'd left him, he'd avoided a serious accident, so he wanted to thank her for saving his life. Relieved to hear she wasn't liable anymore, Jean Dalray was thrilled. She quickly told him thanks weren't necessary. If anything, she was grateful he wasn't making her pay for repairs. She then got up to leave. Kwon Oh-jun was stunned. Not only had she not taken the bait, but he couldn't even get repair money out of her. He felt like dying inside. Unwilling to give up, he hurried after her car, insisting he had to repay her for saving his life somehow. Seeing how sincere he seemed, she found it hard to refuse. She mentioned she worked at a bookstore, and if he really insisted on thanking her, he could buy books there and leave her a 5-star review. Even as the words left her mouth, Jean Dalray felt embarrassed by such a request, but Kwon Oh-jun thought his fish had finally taken the bait. The next day, he showed up at the bookstore. Not only did he write 5-star reviews for Jean Dalray on his own receipts, but he also collected receipts from other customers and wrote glowing reviews on those too. He thought this would surely win her trust. Unfortunately, Jean Dalray was late to work that day, and when her manager saw someone faking reviews for her, she got chewed out badly. Feeling wronged and frustrated, Jean Dalray turned to Kwon Oh-jun and told him she appreciated the gesture, but they were now even. She hoped he wouldn't come looking for her again. Kwon Oh-jun was completely dumbfounded. He wondered if he'd been out of the con game so long that his skills had gotten rusty. He quickly called up a girl he'd hit on at the airport to practice his moves. Using only 30% of his usual charm, she was already suggesting he stay the night. But Kwon Oh-jun knew women who fell for him this easily wouldn't desperately spend money on him. Playing hard to get, he claimed he only saw her as a little sister. He couldn't believe she wanted to sleep with him. How insulting to an innocent guy like him. The girl was mortified and quickly apologized before melting into his warm embrace. Just like that, she'd upgraded to girlfriend 3.0. Feeling his mojo returning, Kwon Oh-jun struck while the iron was hot and went looking for Jean Dalray again. Then he roared an invitation to Jean Dalray to have a meal with him. Jean Dalray, overwhelmed with embarrassment, had no choice but to agree. Watching Kwon Oh-jun leave all pumped up and excited, Jean Dalray couldn't find it in herself to be happy. In fact, she felt completely humiliated. Even after boarding the subway, she couldn't shake the embarrassment. Thinking Jean Dalray had fallen for him, Kwon Oh-jun immediately went out and splurged on a designer outfit, then stopped by a flower shop to buy a bouquet, planning to take her out to dinner. But Jean Dalray shot him down on the spot. Kwon Oh-jun was completely stunned, but he refused to give up. The next day, he showed up at Jean Dalray's workplace. Once he'd set the mood, Kwon Oh-jun launched into a performance filled with lies, claiming that the moment he first saw Jean Dalray, she reminded him of his younger sister. He said his sister was just as beautiful and kind as Jean Dalray, but tragically, she'd been sick and frail since childhood, and because he'd gone abroad to study, he never even got to see her one last time. So he desperately hoped Jean Dalray could be like a sister to him. His story was elaborate and touching, so much so that he even moved himself to tears. But when he turned around, he discovered Jean Dalray had actually fallen asleep. Kwon Oh-jun's entire worldview shattered in that moment. What he didn't know was that Jean Dalray's life story was far more tragic than anything he'd made up. Jean Dalray had lost both parents as a child and married a handsome guy from her village when she was only 20. But less than 6 months into their marriage, her newlywed husband died in a hiking accident. She'd spent the last 5 years raising her child alone while taking care of her mother-in-law. So after hearing Kwon Oh-jun's tale, she felt absolutely nothing. If anything, she almost wanted to laugh. Still, out of politeness, she consoled him and told him not to dwell on such sadness. Then Jean Dalray calmly left. Defeated once again, Kwon Oh-jun could only walk away cursing under his breath. Meanwhile, ever since the blind date with Jean Dalray, Chairman Kim had decided she was going to be his daughter-in-law. But his son, Kim Jin-gu, wasn't exactly thrilled about it because he didn't have a good impression of Jean Dalray. The moment Chairman Kim heard this, he declared that if his son didn't pursue Jean Dalray, he'd donate his $100 million fortune to charity. Kim Jin-gu instantly backed down and quickly changed his tune, saying he'd ask her out the very next day. Soon after, Kim Jin-gu invited Jean Dalray to dinner. What really annoyed Jean Dalray was that she was only 11 minutes late, yet Kim Jin-gu had already ordered himself fried rice and started eating. However, since she needed his advice on something, she let it slide. She then asked Kim Jin-gu how to turn 30 million into 100 million in a short time. But Kim Jin-gu told her it was impossible. It would take at least 3 to 5 years. Jean Dalray was speechless and asked him why he'd even invited her to dinner then. To her disbelief, Kim Jin-gu said it was because his father made him do it. Jean Dalray nearly passed out hearing that. After dinner, Jean Dalray left disappointed. To her surprise, Kim Jin-gu asked her when their next date would be. Jean Dalray was so furious she nearly exploded. She was about to give him a piece of her mind and reject him flat out when suddenly, Kim Jin-gu had a severe allergic reaction and collapsed on the spot. After Jean Dalray sent Kim Jin-gu to the hospital, Chairman Kim offered her $1 million again, asking her to marry into his family. However, Jean Dalray, who had always been greedy for money, refused this time, because she really had no interest in Chairman Kim's son at all. Seeing Kim Dalray stick to her principles despite the tempting offer only makes the chairman more impressed with her, strengthening his resolve to have his son marry her. Meanwhile, Playboy Kwon Oh-jun had been ready to give up after his date with Dalray went south. But when he scrolls through his contact list comparing all the women he knows, he realizes Dalray is still his best bet for his scheme. So he doubles down on his efforts, showing up at the bookstore where she works whenever he gets the chance. To his surprise, After several days of this, he keeps being told she hasn't come in, and her phone stays off. Oh-jun is completely thrown. What he doesn't know is that Dalray has fallen ill. After some digging around, he gets her home address. When he rings the doorbell, Dalray, delirious and confused, thinks her late husband has come home and runs to the door without even putting on shoes. But all that greets her is crushing disappointment. Heartbroken, she bursts into tears. Oh-jun, who usually knows exactly how to handle women, is completely at a loss. All he can do is pull her into his arms and try to comfort her. But Dalray is so overwhelmed with grief that she passes out. Oh-jun, who only wanted to scam some money, panics. Not wanting to get caught up in something serious, he turns to run. But the last shred of conscience he has left stops him in his tracks. He ends up carrying Dalray on his back all the way to the hospital. Thankfully, she turns out to be okay. But what Oh-jun never saw coming was that the attending doctor is none other than ex-girlfriend 1.0, one of his former conquests. Terrified, he tries to bolt, but she spots him anyway. As he's about to leave, she calls out to him. Afraid of payback, he creates a diversion and jumps on a bus to make his escape, leaving ex-girlfriend 1.0 shaking her head in exasperation. On another front, Kim Jin-gu, pressured by his father, reluctantly goes to visit Dalray. But instead of meeting her, he's greeted by her daughter, Bunjang. Jin-gu has no clue how to interact with kids, so they just sit there in awkward silence until Bunjang finally breaks the ice. She wants him to play airplane with her and climbs onto his shoulders. But Jin-gu hates being touched and shakes her off, sending her tumbling to the floor. The little girl bursts into tears. Just then, Dalray and her mother-in-law return from the hospital. Seeing them rush to comfort the crying child and not knowing how to explain himself, Jin-gu makes a hasty exit. His bizarre behavior infuriates the mother-in-law, who immediately calls the matchmaker and tells them the Kim father and son should stop bothering them. At the same time, with nowhere else to go and desperate to avoid sleeping on the streets, Oh-jun remembers the woman he hit on at the airport, girlfriend 3.0. She has no idea she's just become the playboy's next target. After Kwon Oh-jun spent a night at girlfriend 3.0's house, he found out that she had no money at all. So he immediately got dressed and prepared to leave. Girlfriend 3.0, still wondering if she had done something wrong, tried to keep him from leaving. But Kwon Oh-jun lied, saying he had urgent business, and walked away without looking back. After that, Kwon Oh-jun went back to the bookstore to find Jean Dalray. Since he'd taken her to the hospital before, Jean Dalray wasn't as guarded around him anymore. She asked if he could spare 2 hours because she wanted to take him somewhere. Hearing this, Kwon Oh-jun thought he'd finally hooked her and was secretly thrilled. What he didn't realize was that he'd left his contact book, the one with all his girlfriend's information, at girlfriend 3.0's place. Using the information in the book, girlfriend 3.0 tracked him down to the bookstore. When she discovered she was just one of many women he was seeing, she completely broke down. She immediately went looking for Jean Dalray to get some answers, but being shy and introverted, all she could do was follow Jean Dalray around without working up the courage to actually talk to her. Kwon Oh-jun spotted what was happening, and just as she finally mustered up the nerve to approach Jean Dalray, he pulled the fire alarm. The staff rushed to evacuate everyone, and Jean Dalray turned around to help out. Kwon Oh-jun then took girlfriend 3.0 back to his place. Right there, he tore up the contact book and laid everything out on the table. He told her he was a con artist who needed to pay back loan sharks. Since she didn't have any money, he wasn't going to continue seeing her. She needed to face reality. With that, he got up to leave, but girlfriend 3.0 was already in too deep. She clung to his legs, crying and begging him not to leave, promising she'd work herself to the bone to earn money for him if he'd just stay. But Kwon Oh-jun knew she had to support her family and didn't have a dime to spare, so he wasn't about to waste his time. After chewing her out again, he coldly walked away. Before leaving, he warned her that if she ever went looking for Jean Dalray again, there'd be hell to pay. Seeing how heartless he was, girlfriend 3.0 was absolutely devastated. Later, Kwon Oh-jun went on his date with Jean Dalray. As they passed a coffee shop, Jean Dalray went in to ask about what it takes to open one. That's when Kwon Oh-jun learned that her $30,000 in savings was meant for opening a coffee shop. Then Jean Dalray took him to a meditation studio, which really threw him off. After she explained, he finally understood, since he'd lied about his sister dying. Jean Dalray wanted to teach him meditation to help him heal from the pain. He was at a loss for words but went along with it anyway. After the meditation session, he figured things would progress further with Jean Dalray, but instead she told him that his presence made her uncomfortable and she didn't want him coming around anymore. He was stunned. Just then, someone called him, and he immediately went into performance mode. During the call, he pretended a friend was selling a coffee shop for exactly $30,000. After hanging up, he quickly said goodbye to Jean Dalray, jumped in a cab, and took off. Now it was Jean Dalray's turn to have regrets. To get her hands on that coffee shop, she had no choice but to keep calling Kwon Oh-jun. But Kwon Oh-jun knew the power of playing hard to get, so he deliberately ignored her calls. This drove Jean Dalray crazy with curiosity about the coffee shop situation. She was distracted all day long. Finally, when the timing was just right, Kwon Oh-jun called her back. To make it more convincing, he asked her to meet him at a car dealership and put on a show of shopping for a new car. When he saw Jean Dalray, he even turned the tables on her, asking why she wanted to meet up when she'd said they shouldn't see each other anymore. Knowing she was in the wrong, Jean Dalray could only smile awkwardly and claim she'd had a brain malfunction earlier and said the wrong thing, hoping Kwon Oh-jun would forgive her. Then she started asking about the coffee shop. Kwon Oh-jun knew she'd taken the bait, so he kept up the act, pretending to call his friend to ask about it on her behalf. After hanging up, he used the excuse of checking out the coffee shop to invite Jean Dalray to dinner. Through all these maneuvers, Jean Dalray grew more and more trusting of Kwon Oh-jun. She'd wanted to take him to do meditation practice, but the training studio was closed, so they ended up at a park instead. While Jean Dalray was teaching Kwon Oh-jun how to meditate, he unexpectedly kissed her, which made her furious. Kwon Oh-jun quickly explained that his blood sugar had dropped and he suddenly craved something sweet, so he couldn't help himself, but if he ever got the urge again, he'd definitely ask for her permission first. This made Jean Dalray even angrier, and she slapped him across the face. To her surprise, Kwon Oh-jun immediately started bleeding, which made Jean Dalray feel terrible. In the end, they made up. Seeing Jean Dalray falling deeper into his trap, Kwon Oh-jun was thrilled. But then his creditor Jong-gu suddenly showed up asking for help. It turned out Jong-gu had just gone through a breakup and wanted Kwon Oh-jun's professional advice. As a master at wooing women, Kwon Oh-jun didn't hesitate. He immediately staged a heroic rescue scene with Jong-gu. Jong-gu got so into character he nearly beat their buddy Lee Suk to death. But the hard work paid off, and Jong-gu won over the woman of his dreams. Meanwhile, ever since making Jean Dalray's daughter cry, Kim Jin-gu had been feeling guilty. He felt there was something seriously wrong with his personality, so he asked Jean Dalray to teach him how to be a better person. Jean Dalray thought he was pretty pitiful, so she agreed. The next day, they went to a barbecue restaurant where Jean Dalray gave him step-by-step lessons on how to interact with people. After the lesson ended, Kim Jin-gu walked Jean Dalray back to the bookstore, and Kwon Oh-jun happened to see them. Spotting a potential rival, Kwon Oh-jun immediately went over to pick a fight, but Kim Jin-gu remembered Jean Dalray's teaching, always smile at people, so he flashed Kwon Oh-jun a brilliant smile, revealing a bright green piece of chive stuck between his teeth. The sight made Kwon Oh-jun so hungry that he completely forgot why he came in the first place, and he just stood there watching Kim Jin-gu walk away without a care in the world. Later, Kwon Oh-jun headed to the bookstore to find Jean Dalray, but she was still hung up on the fact that he'd stolen a kiss from her and wanted nothing to do with him. So Kwon Oh-jun resorted to following her everywhere she went. When Jean Dalray climbed up a ladder to reach for a book, he saw his chance. He deliberately shook the ladder until she lost her balance, then swooped in to catch her in his arms like a princess. Faced with such an intimate move, the innocent Jean Dalray didn't stand a chance. She gave in and agreed to go on a date with him. The next day, Kwon Oh-jun asked her out under the pretense of checking out a coffee shop for sale. But just when everything seemed to be going according to plan, Jean Dalray got cold feet. She couldn't stop thinking about her late husband. Watching his $30,000 payday slip away, Kwon Oh-jun rushed after her, demanding an explanation. After he pestered her relentlessly, Jean Dalray finally opened up about how her husband had passed away, leaving her to raise their child alone while living with her mother-in-law. She figured this would make him back off immediately, but as a con artist, Kwon Oh-jun couldn't care less. He quickly told her that none of it was her fault and that he was willing to accept everything about her. Then he pulled her into his arms. As the romantic tension built between them, they couldn't help but kiss passionately. Afterwards, still reeling from the intensity of the moment, they sat by the fountain for a long while. Unable to snap out of it, Jean Dalray eventually said she needed more time to think and got up to leave. Kwon Oh-jun stopped her, saying he didn't need an answer right away. She could take her time and let him know when she was ready. But he mentioned that he'd already made plans with a friend to check out the coffee shop, and it would be a shame for her to miss out on the opportunity. That made sense to Jean Dalray, so she decided to go with him to see the place. To her surprise, the coffee shop was way bigger and better than she'd expected. That's when Kwon Oh-jun and his buddy Jong-gu kicked their act into high gear. Jong-gu played the owner and gave her the rundown on how the business was doing. When she heard that the monthly profit was a whopping $3,000, Jean Dalray was over the moon. Right on cue, Lee Suk, posing as a real estate agent, showed up and casually mentioned that he'd found another buyer who was ready to sign the contract and pay up the very next day. Jean Dalray panicked. To make it even more convincing, Kwon Oh-jun actually tried to talk her out of making such a rash decision, but Jean Dalray was already completely sold. The next day, she withdrew the full $30,000 and signed a transfer agreement with Jong-gu. Thrilled that her dream was finally coming true, Jean Dalray was on cloud 9, but the con artist Kwon Oh-jun was even more excited than she was. Before long, Jean Dalray quit her job and showed up at the shop ready to take over, but that's when the real owner of the coffee shop walked in. Realizing she'd been scammed, she frantically tried to reach the con artist, Kwon Oh-jun, but he'd already blocked her number. She rushed over to the real estate office, only to find it completely cleaned out. Reality finally sank in. She'd been scammed. She collapsed to the ground in shock, and Kwon Oh-jun witnessed the whole thing. He figured Jean Dalray would come after him with everything she had, but instead, she sent him a message saying it was all his friend's fault, that he shouldn't blame himself, and that she'd face this with him and work things out together. Her words stirred something unexpected in the usually shameless scammer, a twinge of conscience. Just then, Kwon Oh-jun received devastating news. Jong-goo's older brother, Lee Suk, had taken the money and disappeared. This meant the loan sharks hadn't been paid off, and when collection day came, both he and Jong-goo were dead men. They decided they couldn't just sit around waiting for the worst. After tracking down Lee Suk through his hometown connections, they finally found him packing to skip town. Jong-goo was so furious he laid into Lee Suk with his fists. Kwon Oh-jun spotted the $30,000 he'd scammed from Jin Dao-rae and grabbed it, saying he regretted everything and telling Jong-goo to forget about the debt. Jong-goo wasn't having it and started beating him too. When Lee Suk came to and lunged at Jong-goo, Kwon Oh-jun saw his chance and bolted with the cash. He ran all the way to Jin Dao-rae's place and, just before passing out, managed to put the money back in her hands. To thank him for recovering her savings, Jin Dao-rae and her mother-in-law treated Kwon Oh-jun to their legendary kimchi, and he happily played games with Bunjang. The next day, while Jin Dao-rae and her mother-in-law visited her late husband's grave, Kwon Oh-jun watched the kids. Seeing how well he got along with them, Jin Dao-rae found herself developing real feelings for him. She told him that if he didn't mind her situation, she'd like to date him. Deeply moved, Kwon Oh-jun decided to turn over a new leaf and quit being a con artist, asking his friend Kim Man-do to keep him accountable. With his friend as witness, he found Jin Dao-rae and told her he was ready to be with her. The romantic tension was off the charts, and they kissed passionately. The next day, they went on their first official date, but on their way there, they ran into Kwon Oh-jun's girlfriend 3.0. The encounter left both Kwon Oh-jun and girlfriend 3.0 completely frozen. Jin Dao-rae, who had no clue what was going on, quickly jumped out of the car to apologize. Just when it seemed like Kwon Oh-jun's playboy past was about to be exposed, girlfriend 3.0's mother showed up. To avoid blocking traffic, girlfriend 3.0 had no choice but to leave with her mom. Later, girlfriend 3.0 tracked down Kwon Oh-jun. Despite how deeply he had hurt her, she still harbored feelings for him and asked if he had ever really loved her. By this point, Kwon Oh-jun had committed to turning his life around and being honest. So he told her the brutal truth. He'd only approached her for money. He begged for her forgiveness. Heartbroken, girlfriend 3.0 walked away. After this incident, Kwon Oh-jun felt tremendous guilt about his past actions and started wrestling with whether he should come clean to Jin Dao-rae. But before he could figure it out, Jong-goo and his thugs grabbed him. To force him to pay back his debt, they beat him senseless, leaving him laid up for days recovering. Meanwhile, Kim Jin-goo was learning from Jin Dao-rae how to interact with people. At Kim Jin-goo's insistence, Jin Dao-rae entrusted him with watching her daughter, Bunjang. But Kim Jin-goo had absolutely no idea how to handle a kid, so the whole time he looked completely miserable. Fortunately, Bunjang was a cheerful child, and Kim Jin-goo gradually started to feel less overwhelmed. When Kim Jin-goo came back from the bathroom, he discovered Bunjang had disappeared. Panicked, he frantically searched the mall while Bunjang, realizing he was gone, wandered around crying looking for him. Thankfully, they found each other. After this close call, Kim Jin-goo and Bunjang actually became friends. A few days later, Jin Dao-rae noticed that Kwon Oh-jun's car had been sitting outside her house, but she couldn't reach him anywhere. This made her really uneasy. As it happened, a former coworker from the bookstore mentioned that some woman had been looking for her, so she agreed to meet up. That woman turned out to be girlfriend 3.0. Girlfriend 3.0 proceeded to tell her that Kwon Oh-jun was a professional con artist who specialized in swindling women out of their money and hearts. Jin Dao-rae was absolutely shocked. When Kwon Oh-jun finally recovered enough from his injuries, he rushed to find Jin Dao-rae, ready to confess everything about his past. But it was too late, she already despised him. All he could do was desperately beg for her forgiveness. But Jin Dao-rae's trust in him was completely shattered. In a moment of anger, she told him that if he could get every single woman he deceived to forgive him, then maybe she'd consider forgiving him too. It was just something she said in the heat of the moment, but Kwon Oh-jun actually took it to heart. To prove he was done being a con artist, he immediately drew up a list of the 1,000+ girlfriends he'd scammed. What he didn't expect was that when he found X 2.0 and dropped to his knees begging for forgiveness, she suddenly pulled him into her arms, saying that as long as Kwon Oh-jun didn't abandon her, she'd stay by his side forever. Terrified, Kwon Oh-jun quickly pushed her away, grabbed his friend, and ran for his life, with X 2.0 chasing after them the whole time, begging to get back together. Although things got off to a rocky start, it didn't stop Kwon Oh-jun from continuing with his plan. Next, he went to X 48.0 to ask for forgiveness. This time things went more typically. Her husband beat him up without saying a word. Fortunately, X 48.0 eventually forgave him. After several days of hard work, Kwon Oh-jun received forgiveness from over 100 ex-girlfriends. He immediately put all the forgiveness letters into an envelope and delivered them to Jin Dao-rae, promising to report his progress to her every single single day. At first, Jean Dalray was too angry to accept, but Kwon Oh-jun didn't give up. He persisted in delivering his apology progress to Jean Dalray daily. Seeing that Kwon Oh-jun was genuinely remorseful, Jean Dalray gradually became less resistant to him. Meanwhile, to prove his determination to become a better man, Kwon Oh-jun also found a job as a coach at his former mentor's boxing gym. He started supporting himself instead of relying on women. Thanks to his charm, he quickly attracted dozens of older ladies to his aerobics classes. Through his continuous efforts, his life gradually got back on track, and Jean Dalray noticed all the work he was putting in. As it happened, Jean Dalray's birthday was coming up, and both her mother-in-law and daughter Bundang really missed Kwon Oh-jun, so Jean Dalray invited him over to celebrate her birthday. Kwon Oh-jun was overjoyed. The next day, he immediately went to a boutique to buy Jean Dalray a gift. However, since he was flat broke, he could only afford a cheap pair of earrings. Before heading to Jean Dalray's house, Kwon Oh-jun returned the car that X128.0 had given him. Then he went to the building where Girlfriend 3.0 lived. Girlfriend 3.0 was the girl he felt most guilty about. If she could forgive him, he'd be able to face Jean Dalray with a clear conscience. But when he showed up at Jean Dalray's door that evening, he told her in anguish that he would disappear from her life forever because he didn't deserve any woman's forgiveness. It turned out that when he went to apologize to Girlfriend 3.0 during the day, he learned that she had committed suicide. Because of his deception, the overwhelming guilt left him devastated and without the will to live. Only then did he truly understand how much damage his past actions had caused others. Seeing how heartbroken Kwon Oh-jun was over Girlfriend 3.0, Jean Dalray realized he was genuinely repentant. So she went to his side, and together they prayed that Girlfriend 3.0's spirit in heaven would forgive Kwon Oh-jun. To help Kwon Oh-jun break free from the shadow of his guilt, Jean Dalray suggested he go apologize to his good friend Kim Man-doo, but Kwon Oh-jun felt that since Kim Man-doo had been his buddy for years, there was no need for such formality. Jean Dalray, however, insisted that if he didn't apologize, she wouldn't forgive him either. So Kwon Oh-jun had no choice but to go with Jean Dalray to make amends. But just as they arrived at Kim Man-doo's front door, out walked Kwon Oh-jun's sister, the very person he'd been too ashamed to face. Having never had the courage to confront his sister, Kwon Oh-jun dropped the gift and bolted the moment he heard it was her. His sister immediately gave chase but fell because of her bad leg. Seeing this, Jean Dalray rushed over to help her up and promised she'd bring Kwon Oh-jun back. Then she and Kim Man-doo went after him. When they caught up with Kwon Oh-jun, she lied and said his sister had collapsed, urging him to go back right away. Panicked, Kwon Oh-jun raced back to check on his sister. Once he was inside, Jean Dalray and Kim Man-doo quickly blocked the doorway. Thanks to their matchmaking efforts, the siblings finally reconciled. After this incident, Kwon Oh-jun and Jean Dalray's hearts grew close once again. To show his gratitude, Kwon Oh-jun put on a little performance for Jean Dalray, the first time she'd laughed so genuinely since discovering he was a con artist. But the intimate scene didn't go unnoticed by Kim Jin-gu, who was burning with jealousy. As soon as Kwon Oh-jun left, he asked Jean Dalray to meet him. He'd already been annoyed by Kwon Oh-jun for a while, so he'd had someone dig into his background. After learning that Kwon Oh-jun used to be a playboy, he couldn't understand why Jean Dalray would fall for him. He felt he was a much better match for her than Kwon Oh-jun, so he confessed his feelings to Jean Dalray, and to prove his determination to win her over, he also put on a performance for her. While performing, he told her that anything Kwon Oh-jun could do for her, he could do too. Then he walked away without another word, leaving Jean Dalray looking utterly helpless. Just as Kwon Oh-jun was working hard to atone for his past mistakes, he got arrested by the police for fraud. Hearing that Kwon Oh-jun had been taken in, Jean Dalray rushed to the police station. Facing her, Kwon Oh-jun was overwhelmed with shame, but Jean Dalray comforted him, saying that no matter what happened next, she was willing to spend the rest of her life with him. Deeply moved, Kwon Oh-jun immediately pulled out a cheap pair of earrings and proposed to Jean Dalray, who accepted without hesitation. To celebrate this beautiful moment, the two kissed passionately. Later, Kim Man-doo learned why Kwon Oh-jun had been arrested in the first place. Turns out his ex 128.0 had secretly bought him a car behind her family's back. After he turned over a new leaf, he returned the car, but unfortunately her father found out about it. To cover her own tracks, ex 128.0 claimed she'd been scammed. Once Kim Man-doo understood the situation, she begged ex 128.0 to drop the charges, but the ex refused point blank. Seeing that she wouldn't budge no matter what, Kim Man-doo played her trump card. She threatened to go straight to ex 128.0's husband and spill everything. Not wanting her husband to find out about the affair, ex 128.0 finally agreed to convince her father to drop the charges. Eventually, Kwon Oh-jun walked out a free man. To celebrate this happy occasion, Jean Dalray immediately whipped out some kimchi and treated Kwon Oh-jun to a feast. This beautiful family reunion filled Kwon Oh-jun with hope for the future, and they even wrote out a bucket list together. Then Kwon Oh-jun went to Jean Dalray's mother-in-law and came clean about his past. When the mother-in-law learned he used to be a playboy, she was so furious she splashed water in his face and flat out refused to approve their relationship. To earn her forgiveness, Kwon Oh-jun knelt outside Jean Dalray's house for a full day and night. Combined with Jean Dalray's desperate pleas, the mother-in-law finally came around, and the couple started planning their wedding. When Kim Jin-gu heard they were getting married, he immediately tracked down Kwon Oh-jun and laid out the numbers for him. Raising Jean Jean Dalrei's daughter through college would cost at least $350,000, and Kwon Oh-jun was already drowning in debt. He hoped Kwon Oh-jun would face reality, but Kwon Oh-jun wasn't having it. He ripped off his shirt and fired back loudly, saying that while he might not have money, he had a strong, able body. With a little effort, he could make even $3.5 million. Plus, he had Jean Dalrei backing him up, while Kim Jin-gu had nobody. Kwon Oh-jun's words hit Kim Jin-gu hard. After downing several bottles, he still couldn't figure out where he'd gone wrong. Chairman Kim felt terrible seeing his son so wasted, so he had someone arrange a meeting with Kwon Oh-jun. To Kwon Oh-jun's shock, Chairman Kim turned out to be his loan shark. Chairman Kim told him that if he left Jean Dalrei, his debts would be wiped clean, and he'd even get a hefty breakup payment. Kwon Oh-jun rejected the offer on the spot and even mocked Kim Jin-gu for being like a grade schooler who needs his daddy's help to chase a woman. Chairman Kim was livid but held back from getting physical to save face. Later, X 1.0 called Kwon Oh-jun to the hospital. He immediately dropped to his knees to apologize, but she said that wasn't why she'd called him. She'd found CT scans he'd gotten at their hospital showing several brain aneurysms that could kill him at any moment. The diagnosis hit Kwon Oh-jun like a bolt from the blue. His X 1.0, now his doctor, delivered even worse news: surgery wasn't an option. If his blood pressure spiked or he took a blow to the head, his blood vessels could rupture at any moment, killing him instantly. The only thing he could do was pray for a peaceful life from here on out. For the first time in his life, Kwon Oh-jun felt utterly hopeless. After leaving the hospital, he immediately went to see Jean Dalrei, but he couldn't bring himself to tell her about his condition. Watching her beautiful smile, his fear began to fade. Sure, his illness was life-threatening, but as long as he protected his head, he could still grow old with her. He decided then and there to take life seriously from now on. But just when things seemed manageable, Chairman Kim showed up again with his thugs. Once more, the chairman made the same offer, and once more, Kwon Oh-jun defiantly refused. At the chairman's signal, his men swarmed in and beat Kwon Oh-jun mercilessly. Just when it looked like he might die right there, Jong-gu couldn't stand by any longer and fought back against his own crew. Meanwhile, Kim Jin-gu learned about the situation through his father's men and rushed to the gym. By the time he arrived, Kwon Oh-jun was barely alive and Jong-gu was badly injured too. Kim Jin-gu quickly carried Kwon Oh-jun to the hospital. Seeing how brutally his father had treated Kwon Oh-jun, Kim Jin-gu was furious. He immediately confronted his father and demanded he stop. But Chairman Kim said he didn't care if he had more blood on his hands, as long as it meant his son could be with Jean Dalrei. The argument ended with father and son parting on bitter terms. Soon after, Jean Dalrei went looking for Kwon Oh-jun but found the gym completely trashed. Panicking, she called Kim Mandu to ask where he was. At that moment, Kwon Oh-jun was hiding out at Kim Mandu's place, recovering from his injuries. Kim Mandu had no choice but to lie, telling her Kwon Oh-jun had gone back to his hometown and not to worry. After this incident, Kwon Oh-jun's condition only got worse. That's when reality hit him. The stable life he'd been hoping for was nothing but a pipe dream. So to avoid holding Jean Dalrei back, he broke up with her, claiming he'd only been with her for Chairman Kim's money. Jean Dalrei was absolutely devastated. When her mother found out about the breakup, she was livid and immediately tracked down Kwon Oh-jun to give him a piece of her mind. He finally told her about his condition. Heartbroken for him, she understood his decision as a mother, and was actually grateful he'd made this choice. Then Kwon Oh-jun learned that Jong-gu had been beaten half to death by the loan sharks for protecting him, and his girlfriend had been kidnapped by Chairman Kim's men. Without hesitation, he went to negotiate with the chairman. At the same time, Jean Dalrei refused to believe that Kwon Oh-jun had broken up with her for money, so she went to confront Chairman Kim herself. But she arrived just in time to overhear Kwon Oh-jun saying he'd leave Jean Dalrei for $700,000. When his girlfriend found out, she was devastated and had no choice but to leave heartbroken. However, what she didn't know was that her boyfriend, Kwon Oh-jun, set such terms precisely because he knew Chairman Kim would never pay him $700,000. Kwon Oh-jun did this to propose another condition, that Chairman Kim let Jong-gu and his girlfriend go. Given the choice between $700,000 and releasing Jong-gu and his wife, Chairman Kim readily agreed to let Jong-gu's girlfriend go. After rescuing the hostage, Kwon Oh-jun was about to leave when he noticed Jean Dalrei standing nearby, looking devastated and on the verge of passing out. He rushed over to comfort her, but unexpectedly, Jean Dalrei slapped him across the face. That's when he realized she had overheard his negotiation with Chairman Kim. However, he felt this was the perfect opportunity to make Jean Dalrei forget about him, so he callously told her that $700,000 was exactly the right price and she shouldn't feel cheated. He was just that kind of ruthless jerk who cared only about money, not people. After hearing this, Jean Dalrei completely gave up any hope for Kwon Oh-jun. When she returned home, Kim Jin-gu, who had been watching her child, was about to leave. Because of Chairman Kim's actions, Jean Dalrei harbored resentment toward Kim Jin-gu as well, so she told him not to come looking for her anymore. Unexpectedly, Unexpectedly, Kim Jin-gu asked if she would accept him if he cut ties with his father. Hearing this, Jin Dao-rae was speechless and told him to stop making a fuss. After this, all three of them fell into deep anguish. After some time passed, their lives gradually returned to normal. Then Jin Dao-rae asked Kwon Oh-jun to meet up. Since Kwon Oh-jun's sister had previously given Jin Dao-rae a family heirloom, Jin Dao-rae returned it to him. After taking it, Kwon Oh-jun stood up to leave, but then Jin Dao-rae pulled out something else, the symbol of their engagement, that cheap pair of earrings. When Kwon Oh-jun saw them, he forced himself to stay calm and said they meant nothing to him anymore, telling Jin Dao-rae to throw them away. With that, he got up and left. Recalling all their happy moments together, Jin Dao-rae couldn't stop crying. Meanwhile, Kim Jin-gu's own company went bankrupt due to a bad investment. The investors immediately stormed into the company and beat him up badly. It took great effort for his employees to rescue him. Chairman Kim was extremely worried when he found out. He sought out Jin Dao-rae and begged her to go encourage Kim Jin-gu. Out of respect for the old man, Jin Dao-rae eventually agreed to see Kim Jin-gu. At the same time, Kwon Oh-jun felt extremely guilty about only ever giving Jin Dao-rae a cheap pair of earrings. Just then, someone offered him a high price to be a boxing sparring partner. To save some money for Jin Dao-rae, Kwon Oh-jun agreed. However, Kim Man-do knew that one wrong move could cost him his life, so he strongly opposed it. But Kwon Oh-jun was determined to go through with it. After one sparring session, his condition worsened significantly. Kim Man-do couldn't stand watching him destroy himself like this, so he finally told Jin Dao-rae about Kwon Oh-jun's aneurysm. Jin Dao-rae was absolutely shocked when she found out. When the woman learned her lover had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, she didn't think twice about rushing to his side. She pulled Kwon Oh-jun into her arms without hesitation, telling him she didn't care whether he was sick or not, all that mattered was that he stayed with her. Kwon Oh-jun wanted to lift his arms and hold her tight, but in the end, he pushed Jin Dao-rae away and walked off. He just couldn't bear to ruin her life. But hearing Jin Dao-rae's heart-wrenching cries, the power of their love eventually pulled him back. The two of them threw caution to the wind and held each other tight. Afterward, they sat together, nestled close. As Jin Dao-rae reminisced about how they first met, she comforted Kwon Oh-jun, assuring him that as long as they had each other, they could overcome anything. She thought her words had eased his fears, but to her surprise, Kwon Oh-jun once again asked her to stop looking for him, then got up and left. The next day, determined to prove her commitment to being with Kwon Oh-jun, Jin Dao-rae shared her decision with her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law frantically tried to stop her, but Jin Dao-rae said that if Kwon Oh-jun had to die alone, she wouldn't have the courage to go on living either. Despite the mother-in-law's uncontrollable sobbing, she ultimately couldn't shake Jin Dao-rae's resolve to pursue true love. Jin Dao-rae then rushed off to find Kwon Oh-jun, but Kim Man-do told her he had gone into hiding. Just when no one knew where Kwon Oh-jun was, Jin Dao-rae got a call saying he had collapsed and been hospitalized. She and her mother-in-law hurried to the hospital to see him, but Kwon Oh-jun ran away again to avoid her. To keep Jin Dao-rae from finding him, Kwon Oh-jun stumbled his way to the pool hall his father used to run. He planned to hide out there, but Jin Dao-rae showed up anyway. Once again, Jin Dao-rae reassured Kwon Oh-jun that what she felt for him was true love, so no matter where he went, she would find him. If he was really going to die, she wanted him to die by her side. Deeply moved, Kwon Oh-jun made up his mind to stop running away. He and Jin Dao-rae then went to ask Jin Dao-rae's mother-in-law to let them be together. Seeing their minds were made up, the mother knew there was no point in objecting and reluctantly agreed. With one condition, Kwon Oh-jun had to take care of his health. Only if his condition stabilized would she agree to let them marry. Determined not to let Jin Dao-rae down, Kwon Oh-jun began actively cooperating with his treatment. Thanks to his unwavering commitment to taking care of himself, his condition improved dramatically. Seeing this, Jin Dao-rae's mother-in-law finally accepted him, and with that, the story came to an end. In the final scene, Jong-gu brought his girlfriend to thank Kwon Oh-jun and invited him to be their wedding officiant. Kwon Oh-jun and Jin Dao-rae built a happy family together and lived happily ever after. That's the end of the Korean drama Robbers. I spent 150 hours making this plot explanation. If you can, please give me a like and follow.